Please, let's not talk about Rohkönig. We are on. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Tuesday, so it must be, excuse me, it must be Tuesday's World of Song with Thomas. I am Thomas Hampson, and this is our World of Song. Welcome. This is IDAGIO Live, where classical music happens. Now, that word happens, I know I keep talking about it and I riff on it, but I want to tell you there is a lot happening behind the scenes, and you're about to experience some wonderful press announcements and plans that are already starting in June and in July. This platform, IDAGIO, this is not a record store, ladies and gentlemen. This is an ecosystem for classical music. Welcome to our world. What is fun about this program is that I get to talk about song, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. And even more fun is I get to invite all my younger colleagues that I'm meeting and working with at the Heidelberg Lied Academy that I help run at Heidelberg, as well as our partners at the Boulez Saal in Berlin, the Schubert Woche in January every year. We do concentrate there predominantly on Schubert music, and that is at the Barenboim Said Academy. It's very exciting to introduce to you the new generation of singers. We have so many wonderful singers, and I'm going to ask them a very pointed question by the end of and I'm saying it more that they'll remind me. I have a very pointed question that I always like to ask my young singers about their colleagues coming to concerts, or maybe more pointedly put, not coming to concerts. But we're going to talk about that later. Today, last week we talked about humor in music, which was quite fun. And by the way, somewhere on the IDAGIO Live website, either under my name or down listing, there's a listing of the playlist. And the playlist you're going to see tonight live is not completely complete, but it will be complete. So come back and revisit. Our subject tonight is eros in song, or in fact, I think you have the word erotic staring you in your face as you look at the website. And we're going to cover all those bases. Last week we had humor with a wonderful team of young singers, and the week before that, Julian was with me, as well as we talked about the idea of Wanderer in Lied. And again, we're talking about song, we're talking about classic song, we're talking about poetry set to music, and we're talking about all languages and all epochs, because it is one of the most exciting identifiers of civilization, of who we are as people, what we do, what we think, what we dream of, what we're afraid of, what we lust for, what we. And all of that is in the world of song. And that's why we as song singers are so passionate. We love to make moments of humanness audible in a language called music, inspired by some kind of poetic form. It's kind of fun to turn that equation around. It's not quite as sterile as people think. It's actually a lot of attempts to put in word form and music form what it means to be alive. So part of being alive is certainly our friend Eros. Now, this idea, by the way, I don't assign these ideas to my colleagues. They come up with ideas. We have a meeting every Friday, and we have a lot of contact on email. And I sort of say, oh, what are we going to talk about next week? Apropos next week, in a week, Tuesday, we are going to explore women in creativity, poetry and music, which I think is going to be very, very fun. And we're going to probably have a lot of people online. Maybe a whole group of us are going to have a good time with that. Today is Eros. These very brave young people have decided to talk about their sex lives with you. Of course, in song. I can see some drawn faces. This project, if I remember correctly, we talked about it, Teresa Piesel, Daniel Gertzenberg, and Julian van Melletz. Welcome to our evening of song. If I may start with Daniel and Teresa, if I understand the first part of the playlist, in fact, the playlist that is listed right now, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at it, we're going to look at that together a little bit later, was a program that you guys designed. Did you actually ever get to perform it, or is it something that is gestating, as we say? Teresa.
We didn't get to perform it yet, but we had these ideas about erotic metaphors in song last year in Heidelberg during the academy, as we were playing and seeing through some stuff and recognizing, oh, there's a lot of metaphors going on. And so we decided to collect things that reminded us of that and collect a program. And we didn't do it by now, but we hope that someday we are able to do the program. By now, the playlist, as it is now, it's not the usual program we decided to do. It's now we have all that stuff thrown inside that came into our minds.
This is almost like a work list.
Yeah, because it's a long list right now.
So which one of you had more songs? Oh, and I sang this, and I thought that, and I sang. Oh my God! Was it a fun list? Was it a fun list to put together?
Yeah, it was hard to. I mean, it's always like this. If you program a concert, like some moment things come into your head, and you're not going to stop anymore, and you could sing a recital about 8 hours long or so, and it would definitely be possible with that program with the erotic sensual metaphors, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think we might have the chance to talk about a lot today.
A lot of stuff going on. Sounds promising. Daniel?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say we actually would have performed it a few weeks ago, but due to Corona, the concert was canceled. We would have been part of was a club night at Heidelberg, but it will be most probably happening next year. But how it started is that we were just rehearsing together, and there was this one song by Schumann, Die Lotusblume, and we were just working on it. And the thing is that you kind of somehow, we don't assume that art song would be loaded with sex, because the repertoire comes from a time where somehow sexuality is not expressed very openly. But what happens with what we discovered in that song, Die Lotusblume, is that the metaphoricism, if you allow yourself to think that it is about erotics, then it becomes very obvious. And that was the interesting thought that we found. But because due to the restrictions of that time, it comes to new expressions and creative ways of expressing sexuality, which is not very obvious, and a little bit the contrary to what we experience nowadays, where it's very explicit. But at that time, it's very subtle and intelligent in a way.
Is that a factor of taste of the time, or was it? Are you thinking that some of these, the Schumann period songs that are here, that it would have been considered vulgar, or would it have been forbidden? I mean, I've sung certainly some folk songs from the Descant of Wunderhorn that are quite clearly sexually oriented. I mean, even something as harmless as Wer hat das Liedlein erdacht? The middle section is all about sexual innuendo. And of course, that's the Bildersprache pur. The German Bildersprache. Bildersprache literally means picture language, but it really is the world of metaphor. In German, we also call it the Umgangssprache, which is, I always like to say the Umgang is a detour, but what it really means is going around the essence to insinuate what's being said. And you get natural symbols and colors and animals and all that, and they can have various functions. But do you think, back to my question, do you think that we're experiencing through the certainly early part of the 19th century more a question of decorum, or actually somebody saying you cannot say that, you should not say that in poetry?
I mean, it's difficult to say because we didn't live in the time, so we don't know exactly how the restrictions are, but I assume that there was some kind of a taboo to speak about it publicly. Like there would be, and maybe the sexuality wasn't like a thing that, like in our culture nowadays, where we had a sexual revolution, where the 60s, the 70s, where it became a popular thing that was also being talked in the media and through also video and everything. It became just a thing that became more popular. But before that, I just assumed that in society it wasn't just like a normal thing to put in a poem or to, I mean, there are novels like the Marquis de Sade books that very explicitly talk about it. So it couldn't have been like a no-no, but probably in classical music, it wasn't like a go-go to do,
Look, Julian, let me ask you, following up on this, if you know, since the middle of the 19th century, we of course have the whole world of Freud and Jung, and we think we become so unbelievably enlightened in the 20th and now 21st century. Were these things intended to be metaphors of what we're talking about tonight? Was it supposed to be a veiled message allowing someone in the reading of the poetry or the hearing of the song to elaborate in their imagination on a sexual confrontation?
I mean, in my opinion, yes, I think so. Excuse me. I think it's. I mean, I'm not a scholar on the literature, obviously, but as a performer and reading through, you have to remember that these meetings between two people were often chaperoned. I mean, Clara and Robert Schumann, for example, you know, they were chaperoned for their courtship, and they could communicate. It was a way of communicating, and whether that was explicit or not to them, it allowed them to express themselves in a way that they couldn't. And I think for songs like if I speak on behalf of the English literature, for example, I mean, Shakespeare alluded to so many different things in every performance. If you can read into any number of things, John Donne, to talk about death so much.
Okay,
you know,
so
it's all these allusions.
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. So when we come out on stage and we have these loaded metaphorical poems in their music and everything from a Ganymede in the pure world of sanitized Schubert, to Alban Berg, and I have to think about the poet that I'll have to look at that. You know, Alban Berg and his, you know, overtly, you know, early 20th century sexuality in the Siebenfrühe, you know, just as a span. What is it we want our audience to experience?
I think ultimately we have to remember that we can't tell them what to interpret.
That's kind of where I'm going. Exactly.
So I think it is our job to present it as truthfully as possible. And you know, the best jokes aren't when they're well told explicitly. It's when there's an allusion to it. There's a glint in your eye. There's something that indicates there's more, and it's up to the audience member to figure that out, I think.
Embarrassed looks amongst ourselves.
Exactly. We all know what the underlying
starts
meaning
to study very intently. Let me just look at that text a little bit longer.
And also,
well, I think, yeah.
So, well, and also it plays a role somehow is the setting of the music, because the poem by itself is maybe containing that, but maybe the composer didn't really put that in music. Ganymede is a very good example for that, since in the Schubert version, because we have two compositions of it, in the Schubert version, it's much more naive, and it doesn't have so much of the sexuality as later when Wolf composed it, which is full of sexuality. And
sort of Wagnerian and
should we just go drop the needle on those for a minute? Let's have a look at that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go into screen sharing, and the next thing you'll see is actually the IDAGIO app. And what we've done, I can keep talking while I'm doing this, and everybody tell me if this is showing up correctly. Is that right? I don't want to. Are we seeing the IDAGIO app?
And that's not the IDAGIO app.
Right. What are we saying? Hang on. Screen share. For some reason, it said, oh, here we go. There we go. Boom. Sorry, I did it all wrong. Here we are, right?
Yes.
All right. This is the app, and you can see that they're telling us to join our webinar, which we're not going to do. This is the playlist. I wanted to show you that for just quickly, ladies and gentlemen, how you use this marvelous service, IDAGIO. It doesn't matter what you want to do. Let's just look here under anything you want to look at. You're going to see a title of a song. We've got all these wonderful folk songs. Oh, what a wonderful recording. That's new. These are wonderful songs, absolutely wonderful songs. But you see this ellipsis is what we call these three dots over here, that you can save it to a collection or add it to a playlist. Now that's very good information for you. Say you're listening to these 63 Irish songs or Welsh songs or folk songs, and you only want to take 15 of them on your iPad, then what you do is you click, well, actually, you can just save it to the playlist. But first of all, let me show you something what's really exciting. If you go and push this chevron and you get this title and you click on the title of the song, all of the listing on the right hand are all the other performances of that song in the database of IDAGIO. The database of IDAGIO is amazing. Over 15,000 classical composers. I don't know how many millions of tracks. And this cross-referencing is a wonderful tool for musicians, but also for curious people. That's going to be the same thing if you're listening to the Third Symphony of Beethoven and you love the second movement, you're listening to it and you do that, it's going to show you all the other performances of that. So that's kind of a fun thing. So let's say we like this song here, and we're not going to listen to that. Sorry, my bad. We're going to go here and we're going to go back one level. So we've got this song here. I'm going to go here and I'm going to say add to a playlist, and it's going to pop open my playlist. Now we're not going to actually, well, we can. We're going to save it to our Eros or Eros in song. And then over here you have a playlist, and this playlist automatically goes with you on any device you have, your computer, your iPhone, your iPad. Very exciting. Or it remains on your computer. This is now your playlist. This is my playlist called Eros and Song. Those are the other playlists for the other shows we've done. You will see at the bottom, since it was the newest thing, it's been added, has nothing to do with our show, but that just shows you the process of how we get here. We're going to listen to Schubert. Just drop the needle. We don't have time to listen to everything. Where is Schubert Ganymede?
Down the bottom, I think.
We should listen to, if we could, to both the beginning of the Schubert and the Wolf. Just to
exactly.
They're just there.
Good idea. Okay, well, come on.
It's on the page. You've just passed them, Thomas.
Did I pass him?
Yeah. Just.
Here we go. Here, ladies and gentlemen, is Schubert. If we go here, we can see that it is being performed by Matthias Gönner and Helmut Deutsch. Okay, that is truly very beautiful. Now, who wants to give just a two-sentence synopsis of the Ganymede story, so that we all know that what we're talking about? Ganymede is the young cupbearer who becomes cupbearer, but Zeus plucks him out because of his beauty. Yeah,
so Ganymede is like the beautiful boy. He's a servant. He becomes a servant of Zeus, and he kind of like is the pleasure boy of Zeus. And in the poem, you have in the end, he says, "Oh, come to the skies." And yeah, it's the poem is about the Ganymede realizing he's being ascended to another higher existence. There's also about Ganymede, his beauty is also, I believe, a metaphor for beautiful things in life, and even spring, and the freshness of his life, and the age of Zeus, and all that regeneration. And yes, deeply sexually overtoned. This music sounds beautiful, as if it sounds like a very beautiful story, and it gets slightly more pulsing and excited as we go on. But I wouldn't say it's harmless, but it's not necessarily grabbing us, as it were. Now, where is Mr. Let's have a listen to Mr. Wolf.
Directly above
80 years later. Ganymede, here we go, right next to him. Thank you very much. Here is Hugo Wolf. Who's performing this? This is also now Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau and Gerald Moore. One could do worse.
Morgenglanze, du rings mich anblühst. Frühling, Geliebter, mit 1000
know, that's viciously cruel to break that off. But, you know, it's interesting. You know, the composer can actually bring so much to the fore of what person is actually narrating the story. When I listen to the Schubert, it sounds like a beautiful description of something happening. When I hear the Wolf, I feel like I'm hearing Ganymede talk. You know what I mean? And I'm not, it's not a comparison, ladies and gentlemen, it's not better or worse. It's just, it is obviously the use of musical elements, which in Wolf, you know, Wolf post-Wagner is different than Schubert pre-Wagner. You know, all of these mitigating factors, but nevertheless, the idea that music can mitigate what case or what person we're actually experiencing the poem in, I think is a valid point. What's your guys' reaction, Teresa?
I just thought about that. I wanted to go back to the thing we were talking before listening to the songs, that what do we want to let the audience hear when we sing songs?
Good, thank you.
Thinking about have this
right
this connotation, and I think it's not important that the audience always knows about everything we're thinking about. It's not about we want to explain our interpretation, but it definitely makes a difference if I, as an artist, know that there are some connotations, that there is something going on underneath the plain text. And this is what you can hear. You hear if someone has this horizon of things, of emotions, thoughts on the poetry and on the music in the background. And this is what will transport through your singing, through your playing. And it's not about explaining, okay, this is a sexual connotation, this means that or so. It's just, if you have that in your mind,
yeah,
you will sing it different because you will live it in a different way. And that's, I think, a very important point.
What an incredibly important point. And I want to take it just one step farther, and that is that very often when people are writing about singers, they, in whatever language, they talk about the singer's wonderful ability or lacking ability in coloring the voice or coloring the phrases or color. And as you know, when we work together, what you just described, the level of intricate relationship to why and what is what gives the color to your voice, is what gives the expression to your voice. And that is the world that quite frankly, shows like this are so wonderful to do, because we want our public to be there with us. We want people to have the same reaction or the same living experience of that without us having to say, well, it's about this and think about that, or wink, wink here, you know, or that sort of thing. That's not what we do. But very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Julian, what?
So I think it's some way of sharing your imagination. And it's a live moment. It's how you're feeling it, that character, that story, that moment. And it's I think allowing the audience into your imagination to see what you're seeing somehow.
Okay, you guys are young professionals and you're getting your experience and you're growing and all of that stuff. If you really believe that, other than it being a public forum, why would you ever get nervous walking on stage? People are there to be inside of everything you know, but yet we go out on stage thinking we have to convince them that we know what we're doing or that it's a good thing to do. And I think that's what makes us unnecessarily nervous, distractingly nervous, because if our energy is this way, it cannot possibly be our imagination that people are trying to listen to. That's a huge point. The more you know about the world of song and can only inhabit because of how you sing, is kind of a little frustrating, because you just have to live it and sing it, and hopefully somebody's going to say, oh, wow. You know,
I was taught at college that there was you should only be nervous if you're underprepared. So it's your fault if you're walking on nervous.
That is the probably most significant reason that one is nervous. It is always why, if I'm overly nervous or I feel more nervous, it's because I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. What do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, that's exactly.
You always know what you're doing, so you know you can't. This part of the conversation doesn't even apply to you.
I mean, as a song pianist, I'm much more restricted to the let's say more the psychological content in this musical structure. So when I am very into the imagination, what you've been just talking about, it becomes much easier in a way to perform. But that's difficult to achieve on stage. Like, it's easier if I'm in my practice room and just like rehearse for myself. But then when you're on stage, there's all those things that you've been thinking about before, and it kind of becomes subconscious what you're trying to say. And therefore, it's just like what we've just been talking about pictures like sexuality or also other topics. But it's important to let yourself give those space rooms to think. Because if you, for instance, just say, well, in classical music, sexuality doesn't exist, we just don't think about it, then I close myself to certain parts of the music or the content. And if I allow it to myself, then I have just much more bigger rooms of interpretation, and lets me perform much more precisely.
And
good point. Yeah, Teresa.
this correlates to the fact that if you want to touch someone, you have to go on and take some risk. You have to just go for it and get rid of the fact that you want to please people, and you want everyone to like you, because this is never going to happen. But this is the risk you're going to have if you're just doing what's happening in that moment. If you're just letting it go, what's in your mind, in your imagination, and then letting it happen and just letting the audience decide if they like it or not.
It gives me tremendous fulfillment as an artist to sing something on the edge of audacious, to allow somebody that's listening their edge of audaciousness. You know, it just feels good to say, yes, somebody else thought of that too, and had those feelings as well. And yes, as human beings, in all of our unbelievable complexity, there's always the sides and the edges that any particular moment in any particular society is trying to call taboo or warning track or danger or don't do. I mean, one of the big releases in the 20th and now 21st century is, of course, exploring and even celebrating what was a deeply taboo subject, both in public life as well as personal life, and certainly in literature, and that's homosexuality. And a lot of songs, I mean, because it's Zeus and his cupbearer, we can forgive whatever dalliances may be imagined, because it's all imagination anyway. It's just mythology, right? Right. But what about, you know, in terms of overt or expressive sexuality? We're talking about sexual acts. We're talking about sexual relationships. We're talking about a myriad of kinds of relationships. We're talking about love relationships of coquetry or destroyed or not allowed, and the actual sexual border of male, female, male, female, what all those borders are that we're pushing so hard at today are already 150 years ago in the poetry saying that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is the human relationship. The point is love. The point is home.
I mean, I think we're in a privileged position now to look at it without the barrier of, you know, I mean, homosexuality, for example, up until, was it the 70s, that, you know, you would go to prison if you were found to be homosexual. I mean, so look at something like Heimliche Aufforderung, for example, where Mackay was a gay man and writing about his secret relationship with this other man. And imagine the tension if that was so forbidden that you would go to jail or your life was under threat. And that had to be the most secret relationship. But I think we've all experienced that moment of that secret relationship with someone that there's that electricity. It doesn't matter what gender, whatever, but there's that electricity with someone across the room that you're drawn to. And we're lucky today that we don't have to think of the same constrictions of that for fear of death or fear of imprisonment for who we love.
Well,
I mean, some parts of the world, yes, we do.
It's still significantly stigmatized.
It is, of course.
At least, and there are still laws on the books, and there's still abuse of it. Unless I don't want to be Pollyannic about this, you know, the criminalization of people because of their sexual preferences or their races is still a very dominant subject in all of our societies.
Of course.
And hopefully, by singing these songs, we can at least open a larger conversation. We're going to change.
And hopefully it's not as bad as it was 150 years ago. But it is nice, as you said, it is about
Yeah.
love. It is about human connection. And that is what I think any eroticism in song comes back to. It's about two people or more, two people who have that connection together, and they're drawn, and there's something that every human can relate to.
Teresa.
What I wanted to say, just hearing you, Julian, talk about heimliche Aufforderung, it makes such a difference knowing what's behind that, because it gets so much more intense. It's getting existential, and this is what the song is about. It's not just a love song; it's about that topic, and this is why we're talking about that. And
let me just confuse this a little bit longer. Something like Heimliche Aufforderung, actually the poem is from a woman's perspective to a man, because the Rosenkranz is what a woman gives and puts on the man's head. So it's even more complicated. More to the point is what you just said, Teresa, that the reading of poetry, the deciding of the metaphor that you think that it's representing is incredibly important and needs to be clear. I know that we've had times we've worked together where, I don't have any particular brilliance to offer you, but we work through so many different layers. And at some point I'll look at you and say, right, tell me that story. And it just seems so like Daniel was saying, it seems so self-understood. Well, yeah, hell, why not? Okay, I'll sing that story. And all of this other stuff about singing kind of falls in line, because the how always follows the why. Always. Right?
We know, so like from theater, in theater it's very obvious, like that if an actor or an actress don't really have the imagination or living the character, then we won't be so touched. And in music, of course, there's always also the piano and just the voice by itself, which is already touching. But it comes on a different level if we make this kind of like work and subtext work and the understanding of what all of this is about. Yeah.
Right. You guys made a wonderful list here, and I'm just going to read it. Explicit eroticism and sex in art song. Now, that's not a sentence you're going to read very often. Double entendre and metaphor to express what was so taboo at a specific time. Exoticism and eroticism, how white women couldn't be sexualized. The link, and this is, I think, really interesting. This is a big sentence. The link between lust, sex, death in the world of myth and folklore. Now,
that was something that I was particularly interested in, actually. I mean, that was something I was particularly interested in, because it's so funny. If you look at, say, songs like L'Invitation au Voyage, or
I was just thinking
songs, which is like, it's
should we drop the needle on that?
And that's, well, I'll just say one thing after that. So you have these ideas of exoticism through that, and you're allowed to be sexual if it's exotic. And then the other idea of lust and sex for pleasure, it almost always leads to death. I mean, look, the Lorelei has been a fascination with every single major writer, painter, poet, musician, everything. And just the list, and it's still a fascination with composers and poets nowadays. And I think, I mean, so to have the exoticism, that it's allowed to be sexual if it's exotic, and then, but if it's actually just lust and some sort of passion, then that's actually deadly. That's death.
If there is one thing I would like someone to take away, and I'll ask you your question yourself, what I would like anyone to take away from any of these sessions on Tuesday is that the world of what I'm singing has 5 worlds behind it. And my invitation to anybody listening to me sing a song is go explore all the world behind what you've just heard. Let's drop the needle. If you don't mind, I'm going to take José van Dam. One, I adore this man, and just he's such a wonderful colleague. And I've learned so much from him over the years and enjoyed so much time on stage. I think he's a wonderful singer. And his, at this time, young pianist friend, Maciej Pikulski, I've had the pleasure of making some records with and doing performances with. He's a wonderful pianist. So let's listen to José and Maciej, L'Invitation au Voyage du Parc.
Ma sœur, songe à la douceur d'aller là-bas, vivre sans et soleil mouillé de ces ciels brouillés pour mon esprit, oh, les charmes si mystérieux de tes traîtres yeux brillant à travers leurs larmes. Là, tout n'est qu'ordre et beauté. Luxe, calme et volupté.
Oh, that is so hard to stop. You know, I just, as singers, quickly between, just amongst us, his ability to be so specific to some words and yet never interrupt the legato. And in fact, it's always part of the legato that's going to bloom into the emotion of the vowel and the musical language, and whatever he sings is just masterly. Oh my goodness.
Incredible.
I don't know. Jose, I hope you're well, and I hope you're, you know, he's just a wonderful guy. Don't you think? That wasn't bad, was it? We kind of like that.
Almost listening to it is sensual, isn't it? I
was going to say, okay, now we've listened to it. Everybody, maybe somebody's heard it for the first time. Gee, what's that song about? What's the song about?
He's in love. It's well, I think there's two really interesting ideas. There's schools of thought that think, you know, his love is in Holland and it's in the fields of the poppies and things. But there's another school of thought that it's his black lover, and he wants to go to where she is from. I mean, I think in the she might be Madagascar or something, and the idea is going there where it's this beautiful lap of luxury, and we can be together. That you are like everything to me.
Paul Gauguin poem.
Yeah, exactly.
What's interesting is also that there is the subject. He says aimer et mourir, aimer à loisir, so to love and to die. So that what we're just talking about, that there's the sexuality is placed in the place of the other. So either into the travel to a place where we are not, or into death. So we're loving and dying. So it's like, or it's not. It's somehow the sexuality can't happen really here. We have to imagine it.
Or the complete unity of love is a kind of death of self.
Yeah, that's one type of love.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, it's the giving yourself totally up. What Teresa, what I rolled over the top of something you said right at the beginning. There's no question that this piece, to anybody, when it first starts off in the first 5 seconds, this is a kind of sensuality that is deeply inviting to feel good about it. Whether there's really a message of death in there or not, you take this musical journey of this is okay to be here at this time. It doesn't feel foreboding to me at all.
No, I think it's metaphysical death. I think that's, you know, this is a typical double entendre.
Teresa?
Like it's just like this Wagner Liebestod. It's just like this evolving, dissolving in love.
Something about the Liebestod just feels like drugs, but never mind. Do we need to, what else can we listen to talk about? What we've established is that we live in a world of metaphor, but more specifically, we live as artists, as singers, we live in a world of deciphering symbols. And we make those symbols, we choose to make those symbols in any particular moment audible. And we may very well have a myriad of decisions we could make, but at any particular time, we have to decide that's the one we're going to go with now. and that world that we carry with us is what people call the coloring of voices. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just also wanted to mention that like with that song, immediately you have a feeling independently of, like you could understand French or not, you could understand the text in the first place or not, it already gives you some kind of a feeling. And the interesting thing, which we do in our work, is that we discover layer by layer, like we go separately through the text, we go separately through the music, we analyze the piece, we talk about it, so we have different interpretations. But as a listener, you're like, if you hear it for the first time in a concert or like on a recording, you just get the whole thing at once. And it's something that I always want to encourage, kind of also to just like go and read the poetry for itself, or go and like dig a little bit deeper in it. That's what we usually do. And that's kind of just an interesting thing to do.
Well, I think that's a very big point, Daniel. We don't want to brush over that. The heartbeat of every song is the poem. And what it becomes through music is a gestalt experience, in my opinion, of heart and brain. And the written symbol is enormously important because it's the pathway into, in my opinion, the human experience, which then the composer fleshes out. And sometimes that relationship is unclear or ambiguous and may even be, in your opinion, as an artist, a disagreement. Maybe you see something else in the poem and say, well, I guess Schubert decided, or Schumann or Berlioz or whatever, they decided to go in that direction. I'm not sure that's an interesting discussion, but there's these layers of encoding that then we just make live. And the ambiguousness of it is what is so deeply human about it, seems to me. I think recitals are just a wonderful celebration of the myriad of questions, unanswerable, if you will, of human life. It's just a wonderful oasis for 90 minutes or 2 hours, where you're allowed to just think of everything you possibly want to think of in your own life and experience it. It's your personal experience. It has nothing to do with us on stage. We're just the vehicle for this kind of stuff. What else do you guys want to say about eroticism, eros? What do you think? No, here we go. Fascination of sex, eroticism, homosexual. I think we've hit on the big items. Now, if I may, we've done well with the postulation. Are we back in IDAGIO now? What are we going to do with something like Mr. Quilter? Should we have
what I think is really interesting about the Quilter songs is that they're arguments for seduction. So I think both of those that I've chosen, the Now Sleeps the Crimson Petal and Love's Philosophy.
Sorry, I've pushed a completely wrong button. There we go. Sorry. Nimmersatte Liebe is not what we're going to listen to. I'm sorry, Julian. Go ahead. Say it again.
Well, I think what's really interesting at this, in Elizabethan time, later, the arguments for seduction. So Now Sleeps the Crimson Petal. So if the crimson petal is allowed to sleep on your breast, why can't I? Or Love's Philosophy. Everything in nature is in twos. Therefore, why aren't you with me? So these are the arguments that they're setting up for obviously being together at the end of it.
Are these Shakespeare texts?
No, they're not. The first one's by Shelley, I think.
Could well be. They sound very Heine. Should we have a listen to Dame Janet Baker?
Yes, please.
Now Sleeps the Crimson.
Oh, that's actually Thomas Allen, that one.
I beg pardon? That's Thomas. This is the recordings. Because we haven't heard any ladies sing it. Sorry, my bad.
This one's Dame Janet.
Is that Dame Janet?
That's Dame Janet, yeah.
Love's Philosophy with Dame Janet Baker. Forgive me.
The fountains mingle with the river, and the rivers with the ocean. The winds of heaven mix forever with a sweet emotion. Nothing in the world is single, all things by a law divine in one another's being mingle. Why not I with thine, not I with thine?
Now, when I listen to that, I mean, I know the poem. I hear that. It attracts me deeply. But I must say, I mean, in all honesty, that the musical structure feels like a kind of framing of a picture that something else is going on. It doesn't feel like text setting to me. Does it to you?
No, I mean, it's, as Daniel was saying before, it's the psychological side of it. There's a huge excitement of, I mean, an impetuousness there somehow. It's so exciting, and it's because it's so fast, it's getting the argument out as fast as possible. Why not I with thine? That's all she wants to say. That's all he wants to say. Why not me with you?
Now.
I mean, absolutely, there's an urgency. It's like, come on, we've got to get there.
I love it. What else? You guys have worked on this program. What,
very good
you
example.
had everything from Brahms to Berg to whatever else. Did you have Schubert?
Very good example would be also the Schönberg Galatea,
Yeah.
the Brettlieder, because we've been talking about so much about unexplicit things, but this is a very explicit song, because also those are cabaret songs. So the text is very, very explicit about Galatea, schönes Kind.
This is the Schoenberg. Sorry, I should have be quiet. I beg your pardon. So we're going to hear one of the number 7 Brettlieder of Schoenberg, cabaret songs, and this is Galatea. Is that what we're talking about?
And it's like a show on like in a cabaret, as you would imagine. Yeah.
Cruel to stop there. They're wonderful songs. I looked at them a long time ago. We don't hear them very often. Jessie Norman used to love to sing these songs. I remember seeing her at a recital in Salzburg many, many years ago, and she sang these. It was absolutely the Tchaikovsky French songs and the Brettlieder of Schoenberg. It was just unbelievable. Guys, we're going to have to wrap it up. What do you want to say? I give each one of you, as we say in German, Schlusswort. Who's first? Ladies first?
I can start. What I was thinking about, talking about all that central things in art song, is that one thing that is also important for me is we're living in a time where sexuality is quite upfront and sometimes quite bold, and our world society is quite pornographic. And it's something so beautiful to have these poems and these poems, texts, songs that are truly about sex and love, but in such a different language, in such a different way of talking. If someone writes you a love letter, it's different if it comes from Rilke or from a rapper from nowadays. It can be really nice, but it's the same thing with like thinking about sexuality. Reading this text is just so beautiful, and it's something we should discover more in our times, I think.
Well said. Julian.
As you said at the beginning, it's showing a window of human emotion, of humanity and honesty. And I think whatever level you want to read the poem at or want to interpret the song, there's just so much in art song that is just a window of humanity and something that we are so lucky to share and explore. And isn't that what it's all about? We get to tell these wonderful stories and experience something with the audience.
Well said. Daniel, you are actually a poet. Talk to us.
Yeah, so to follow up on
I don't mean that, ladies and gentlemen, as an adjective. This man writes beautiful poetry. Daniel.
Oh, thank you. No, I would just like follow up on that and to see that the human aspects and the way we can experience human experience through art, and in this particular case, poetry or song, is very related to how we can experience ourselves and experience different dimensions of ourselves. If sexuality nowadays can be portrayed as something very stereotypical and in a way perfect, then we also get to experience a very imaginative side of it, and a very unusual side and personal. And I think as to just say, to discover your own sexuality doesn't necessarily mean to follow all the pictures that we see all the time, but to use imagination. And I think that's something that we can experience through art song or music, classical music in itself.
Okay, guys, last question. We got to go. You're wonderful. I adore you guys. We work together. It's fun to watch you develop all that stuff. We've had a wonderful conversation. We have had many wonderful conversations. Are you having these kinds of conversations with your non-musical friends? And if it is so important to you, and if you do have that, are your non-musical friends coming to concerts because they want to know what you're talking about, or they want to have that experience themselves? Why is there not more spontaneous interest in classical music concerts in your generation, other than the unbelievable number of very, very talented, very interesting musicians and artists? Big question. You each have 20 seconds.
Who starts? Okay, I stop. I will
Go.
20 seconds. I think that through, for instance, subjects like this, to lay them open, it's a very good subject to talk about and to approach people in different, also people of our age. And I do speak with my friends and also my non-music friends about that. And I find what I find is, if I'm daring and exploring what is in music or an art song very profoundly, then it becomes super interesting and they're totally into it. It's like, it's also some kind of way how we communicate the content of what we're doing. And I guess, like, for instance, such a session is very nice to talk about. And we, the same thing we should do with our friends, but also to reach out to our generation. It's very, very important.
Julian.
I think a lot of my friends I studied at university before I went to a conservatoire, and a lot of my friends are now lawyers or doctors and things, and they have real jobs. And they've always been super supportive, because it's something that is so human, and they find these ideas that we sing about, and they might not understand the language, but they can understand communication. And they come along to watch me perform. And I think, I mean, it's our job to introduce more people to it as we can. And making it as personable and honest as possible makes a huge difference in communicating what music and classical music is to anyone.
Darling, last word.
It's hard to follow up to that, because you said almost everything I wanted to say. I think it's important to talk to everyone, to introduce this immense beauty that is in art song and classical music, and to tell them that everything is in it. For example, sensual metaphors. And so it might open up. The first time I told my roommates and all my friends about this erotic songs topic, they were so keen to know about it. So maybe that's one way to get all of them.
I love it. To be continued. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful program. Thank you, everybody, for being with us this evening. Tuesdays, Thomas' World of Song, but it's actually our World of Song. See you on Tuesday. What's that?
And your World of Song. Everyone's
our World of Song. It's the World of Song. Been great. Thank you. IDAGIO Live, where clearly